we're going to hop into Illustrator and do a little demo of how to use the pattern tool. It's a very simple tool. It's a complicated tool, but it's simple to use and easy to get going with and to experiment with. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool. I'm just going to draw a quick shape out there, and that's all I really need to make a pattern. So I go to Object, Pattern, Make, and there's a dialog box that comes up. Illustrator has this gray bar at the top and a red line, and it says the new pattern has been added to the swatches panel. That's going to be this panel over here, which I have open. And if I scroll down, well, it won't let me scroll right now, but I'll show you in a second. Any changes made while in pattern editing mode will be applied to the swatch upon exit. So, okay, I understand that. And if I scroll down now, you can see there's new pattern here, and it looks sort of like this. So there's a tile editing option here. You see the blue box that comes around the artwork we originally drew, and if I click on that, it lets me change that tile. The tile is the repetition. So every time the tile basically creates the structure for the repetition, and the artwork sits within the tile. And so we can see this is a grid, and it's laid out like a grid, but if we brick that grid, the brick offset being 1/2, it means that the tile will offset by 1/2 of the width of the brick. So that makes sense. And I think if we, you can adjust the height and whatnot here. You can adjust the width here also. And in this way, you can create a variety of different scenarios that you may or may not find attractive. Let's say that we like this one. Then when we're done, you can see dim copies down here. It's a feature that allows you to see what's the real tile and what's a copy. And you can see, you can adjust that here. If I make it 30%, I see the original artwork and I see how the copies are overlaying it. Also here, there's the overlap. And you can mess with that as well in order to get different kinds of configurations. The patterns we're making are super simple. I don't think we need to do a lot of that, but if you do, then you can explore that and find out more about how that works. So when I'm done, I'm going to say done, and then the artwork disappears. That throws people off because it's like, well, I just made it. Where did it go? Well, it told us where it went. It told us it's a swatch in the swatches palette, and here it is right here. So that means if I draw a shape and I click on the swatch, then it will fill it with that swatch, or it'll make it the stroke in the case of like if the stroke is active. Let's swap back to that because that's not what we want. So once I have that, like maybe I'm satisfied and I'd like to make a new one. What if I want to make a variation on this one? Well, you can go back into this one and double click it, edit it. But before you make any edits, you're going to want to go ahead and save a copy. So you save a copy. Let's call this one boxes and say OK. Then any edit that I make here will not affect boxes. You can see boxes is now down here. It will affect the new pattern. So I'm going to take that and rotate it a bit. Maybe I like that one. It doesn't need to be a big difference. Let's just try that. And for this one, let's call this one slanted. Anyway, we could adjust some other things too, but I think I'm just going to keep it the way. Let's do it like that. So that's fine. Say done. And now, because the original pattern was applied to this shape, it updates that shape. And that's great because it means that if you're doing a design, you need to adjust the pattern. It's going to adjust every instance of that pattern in your artwork, which is good. It can also be bad if you don't quite know what you're doing. So as I move this shape that has the pattern applied to it, you can see that the pattern itself is not moving. If I scale it down, you can see the pattern itself is not scaling down. It's almost like the shape that we've filled it with is a window into a pattern. And I think you can think of it like that when it's in this mode. But if I press Command K, which will bring out my preferences. If you go, if you want to use the menu, you go to Illustrator, Preferences, General. You see Command K there. There's a tick box here for Transform Pattern Tiles. If I click that, say OK, then when I scale it, for instance, it gets bigger. When I move it, it stays right where it is. The pattern itself stays right where it is inside the box. If I scale it down, it gets smaller. That's an important difference, because what we had before, and let me go ahead and draw a new shape out here, which will take on those same scale attributes when we draw it in there. But if I click on, say, boxes, and then I click back to slanted, here, hang on, it makes the original populated. So it loses the scale parameter that you had adjusted, which is important to know. So which is really the one? They both have the same pattern applied to them, but they look very different. And if I turn off my transform pattern tiles, I say okay, and now when I scale this one up, it doesn't scale it up. This one, when I scale it up, it doesn't scale it up. I have two different sizes of patterns even though the same pattern is applied, because when I adjusted the scale, I had that one box ticked, and that's going to stay with this shape as much as I want. And for instance, if I scale it back down and I make a copy of it, I get that same scale attribute. So that scale attribute is coming along with that shape. However, if I make a new shape and I apply that pattern to it, it will give me the original. So what if I want the original pattern to actually be smaller, which is something you might want? Let's go in there and double click it, and then I'm going to save a copy before I do anything. So this is going to be slanted, like it is, slanted, normal. Okay, and then anything that, I'm going to call this one altered, slanted alternative, something like that. And then anything that I do in here with this one, actually, let's put it back to like, that seems fine. That will apply to this new one. So I'm going to say done, and now everything with that instance has it applied to it. The scale attribute from those shapes is still maintained, but the pattern itself is different. So what have I really done? Well, I've already very quickly, in a short amount of time, made a few patterns. And it's nice to collect those and see them in their different ways next to one another. And that's what we'll have you do. We'll share a template with you where you can populate your template with the patterns that you make, and you can see how they look all together, and then you can start to make adjustments to them, and then eventually test them out as they go onto your folded airplane. But it doesn't mean you can only use rectangles. You can use straight lines, curved lines, any types of shapes that you can imagine. The pattern that I made for the title card of this video was using the polygon tool, probably, with 3 sides, and say okay, make that black. You see it automatically by default comes in with the previous pattern applied to it. So let's go and fill it with black. Say fill black, thank you, and then go object. I want it to be smaller though. Let's scale it down. Hold the shift key if you want to scale proportionally. Object, pattern, make, and it's going to tell me again. If you think you know what it's talking about, say don't show again, say okay, and you can see the pattern here. I think all I did was to brick it, right? And that's it. It's not hard to make a pretty compelling pattern. Let's say done, and then let's go ahead and fill that shape with it, with the new pattern. So that's it for the pattern editing tool. It's a good tool to use, and you can get a lot of visual interest going quickly. The tricky part is to control the hierarchy and the relationships to create a good harmonious design.